It's all good. I love it. Okay, cool. All right, so in this webinar, we're just going to be talking about understanding water flow, how it works, etc., and how it really triggers fish to bite and to help you catch more fish. So starting off, we will need to go into how a fish senses work, and that will give you a deeper understanding on sort of how that water flow will affect how fish feed, essentially. So I won't go too deep into it, but basically, majority of fish, or pretty much all fish, will have this thing here called a lateral line. And the lateral line is a very unique organ in that what happens is, as the water passes by the flank of the fish, or the side of the fish, it detects pressure changes, it detects also movement, vibrations through the water temperature changes. It's basically their telltale sign of what is happening around them. So even though some fish may not be able to see, because their eye's up here and they've got the body back here, that almost acts as a second eye in that it can help them sense the surroundings and help them sense the surroundings. Now, with that, why that's so important is that it it tells the fish so much what's going on around it in terms of what the water's doing. So if the water is coming from a different direction, or if the water drops in temperature or something like that, it can help tell the fish to A, start feeding, or B, escape from danger or something like that. Now, the reason for that is that majority of fish are cold-blooded, similar to a snake or a lizard, in that the water temperature surrounding that fish will dictate its body temperature. So if a fish is in warmer water, it's generally going to have a bit of a higher body temperature. It's going to be a little bit more, the metabolism goes up, etc. Especially if that water temperature does fluctuate a little bit where the fish is living, and that can be a trigger for them to feed. Where if it's too cold, metabolism slows, the fish slows down, and they may not be hungry enough to feed. So moving on from there. What makes water flow so important? So with the water flow, it's very similar to the wind. However, being water, it's a lot more dense, so it's going to have things in the water that the fish can eat. So it's going to bring food, it's going to bring scent, and it's also going to bring slight changes and variations, which really is going to promote fish feeding. Now, fish are really lazy. Like I've said before, they are being cold, lower body temperature. Now, being cold-blooded, they're not like us. They don't have a body temperature that's regulated at 36 degrees. And the reason for that, we need to eat quite regularly to maintain that energy, to maintain our body temperature. Whereas a fish, they don't need to eat to maintain that body temperature because their body temperature is regulated by the outside water. So what they do is, the way they want to feed is they're going to feed, with minimum effort for maximum yield. So essentially, they're going to be super lazy. They're not going to actively hunt all the time because it's going to waste their energy. So they're going to sit back, wait for certain water currents or water flows that they know brings food, and then they'll start feeding when it's the right time, where they know they're going to get a good feed without doing too much. So with the water flow or current movement, they can sit in one spot, just let it come past, and it's almost like a drive-through in some places, where the fish will, like a flathead, which an ambush predator, will sit there. Water flow goes past, little fish are a bit disorientated in that water flow or current flow, and then they'll just snap them out of the water nice and easy. When there's no flow, they might think, nothing really happening, I'm not going to be sort of active in eating, and I'm just going to chill for a bit and not really hunt or feed. So as an angler, it's extremely important to know, A, the lateral line, way fish feed, the sensors, and B, the currents and the water flow, which can trigger these sensors to promote feeding. Now, and water flow is also important for a couple of other reasons too. Not only is it going to bring food or smells, but water flow, especially from a cooler temperature. So if you're fishing in like brackish water or more stagnant water that's been in the sun all day, that water being a little bit warmer, yes, it can trigger some fish feeding, but also it loses a lot of oxygen, so it becomes quite stagnant. Whereas when you have a bit of tidal flow or water flow come in that's a little bit cooler, it will be more oxygenated, come into that area, and again promote that feeding habit as well. So you got oxygen coming in. Also, it can disorientate fish because especially rushing water, like if it's been raining heavy and there's a stormwater outlet that's pumping water out, that water is going to be a little bit dirty, and it's going to disorientate smaller fish around the area, where the larger fish know this and they can pick them off easy feed. So And the other thing that you need to be really important is that it's going to bring the fish to you. This is probably the key importance. If you're fishing an area that has no water flow, not only the fish may not be keen to feed because it's not really, feeding time, they're not going to be coming to your area through burley. So if you throw some burley, like from a burley pot or something like this, off your boat or even off the wharf or on the shore, that scent dispersion might only have a radius of about 10 meters because there's no movement. It's stagnant. Whereas if you've got water flow, depending on the strength of it, you can pop your burley here, and then that water flow is going to push the burley out maybe even a few hundred meters. So you're covering a much larger area of your scent to bring the fish to you rather than that small area having stagnant water. So what creates the water flow? So a lot of the times it's going to be tide. If you're fishing in the estuaries or river systems, the tidal flow is going to be the reason why the water moves. Higher the tides and lower the tides, the more differential, you're going to have more water flow to make up for it, whereas the smaller tides will have a little bit less water flow. What affects that too is a lot of rainwater, especially in the Hawkesbury and things like that. If you've got a lot of rainwater emptying into one area, or flowing into one area, that increase of water flow may be pushing out, and it might increase that tidal flow to get that water out. So rain can affect it. Stormwater drains affect water flow. It's water coming out of the drains, pumping into your estuary systems or beaches, and that's water going out. So that's another reason. Wind and waves, if you're in the ocean, if you're fishing the beach and rocks, even the estuary as well, or offshore, the wind and waves generate a lot of power, and that power in the form of waves crashing and things like that will create water flow, especially surface water flow, and it will move water that way. So that's the energy there. Tides, as mentioned, gravitational, rivers and streams, water comes down through gravity, it can empty out into somewhere, like a larger estuary system or something like that. And yeah, as I mentioned, stormwater and rain. And sorry, just quickly too, the temperature and upwelling. So the temperature change in water is similar to air. So when you have warmer air, it'll rise, cooler air will come in and take that. So similar to ocean water, the warmer surface temperature can rise and the cooler water from underneath will come up, which is called an upwelling. Now that happens more, offshore, out in the open ocean, but it does happen on our shoreline. So there's a thing called an Ekman transport, which is basically what happens is, especially during summer on our east coast here, we have a lot of nor'east sea breezes. And when you have constant nor'east sea breezes over and over, that energy in the waves and wind pushes the surface water north to south. And by taking that warmer surface water away, which has been warmed up by the sun, the cooler water from underneath creates an upwelling, and it comes up and replaces that surface water. So I don't know if you've ever gone for a swim or something like that, even in the middle of summer and it's freezing cold. That's because of the Ekman transport. Now that is water flow that's definitely you need to consider, especially if you're beach or rock fishing, because that drop in temperature can really play with the fish's senses and it can really shut them down from feeding. So we'll talk about that a bit later. Okay, so let's take in some specifics. So looking at the estuary and river water flow. So most of the time this is going to be dictated by tidal flow. So as here we've got tide going or tidal flow running right to left. Now, when the water moves faster, you're going to have to change your rigs, change your burley style, or change your tactics to adhere to the type of current you're fishing in. Now, generally the peak of the current will be sort of the last maybe 2 hours of the change, or before the change, and the first 2 hours of the change. That mid-tide will sort of flow through a bit, and then it'll sort of slow down just as you get that tidal change. So the current will, subside and also increase depending on what time of the tide it is. So you'll tell that when you're out there. Obviously, smaller lows to higher highs will generate a little more current, and that's going to help you really find places to fish in the river or estuary, estuary or river system. So when we take into consideration water flow, yes, it's going to promote feeding. Yes, it's going to promote, a few other items that can help fish feed, but there is a lot to consider to help you catch more fish. So with this diagram here, if you're fishing near land, so if you've got like an estuary or river system that has, land on either side, etc., you're generally going to have these things called eddies. Now, an eddy is essentially a backflow of water current. So as you can see here, the water flow is going right to left over along there. And then you've got a landmark that comes around here, and it's got a bit of a point on it. And as that current hits that point, it bounces off, comes out, and as that energy hits and comes out, it mixes with the energy going right to left and then creates a swirl. And that back eddy is an ideal place to start your fishing. Now, if you are land-based, you can sort of fish from the shore here. You'll be casting around these eddies. And then if you're in a boat, you might want to anchor behind an eddy or to the edge of it and then cast in there. Two things that eddies provide. An eddy provides a backflow of current that gives fish a rest. So if you're a larger predatory fish, you might come down with the current, feel that eddy and go, you know what, I'm just going to chill here for a bit. I'm going to sit there a little bit out of the current, get my energy back and just sort of stay stationary. And you never know, there might be some food coming by. Two, it brings food. Now, if you're a little fish and there's a bit of current and you're going with the current, you might just get swept away, hit this eddy, you get swirled around a bit, and that dewey or that flathead that's sitting on the edge of that eddy will notice that and will generally snap it up. Now, if you have kids like myself, you may have seen Finding Dory. It's a bit of a random one, but when you watch Finding Dory, there's a scene in that movie where they really emphasize not going in the undertow or the current. And what happens is Dory gets caught in the undertow, gets swept away, and ends up in, in the movie. Now, what the important part of that is that undertow was extremely important for Dory not to go into. She got, wafted away. The same thing will happen here. Those little fish might be chilling here. They might come out a little bit too far, or that current might sort of swing in, catch one, blow it into an area they don't want to be, and the predatory fish, that's where they're hiding. So, if you're fishing in if you're fishing in a lot of current in an estuary, in a river system like that, it's best to find these eddies. And eddies will appear when you have pinnacles or points of landmass where it's going to distort the current. That's where you want to be. So that's a good place to start. If you're new to an area or something like that, definitely give that a go. And if you're in a boat, if you're just around to the edge of this eddy, so if you're in here, there's not much current at all. So you might not catch fish here where the boat is. But if you're anchored here, you can cast towards the eddy or towards the edge of it, and you can move around here. So you can bait fish around there, or you can throw lures around that eddy, hoping that the predatory fish are sitting there. Now, if you're sitting up here, you're just going to really have a lot of water flow going in one direction. It may attract a fish, it may not. So if you concentrate your fishing to areas where the fish will hopefully be feeding out of that current, then that's ideally where you want to be. So with this one, so this is, if we zoomed in on if we are in the middle of the estuary system, sometimes you want to bring the fish to you. Now, if you are doing what I've mentioned before, that's a really active way to fish. That's a way that you could hit different eddies. You can be land-based, you can be boat-based, and then try and find predatory fish. But if you want to sit and soak some baits for a long period of time, you can go in the middle and sit into that water flow and wait for a fish to come to you. Depending on how strong the water flow is, you're going to have to change your tactics a little bit. So as I mentioned before, you want to bring the fish to you. And the best way to do that is through burley. So if you assume that's your burley bucket, you got a light water flow. If it's a really strong water flow, you may need to A, up your sinkers, or B, invest in something like this, which is a really heavy burley trap. Now, the reason for that is if I threw burley in here, like a bit of bread, it's going to end up down there. And the fish will start feeding over here, and I'm going to be fishless up here. So match your burley and your baits to how strong the current is. Ideally, you want something like this, a burley bucket or a weighted burley cage with some pellets. Pellets are great because you can throw them in and they sink, so you're going to be able to get them on the bottom and it's not going to drift away too quick. But these burley cages are great because you can sit the burley cage there, you can bring it down closer to the bottom where the fish might be feeding, and then the fish will pick up smells and they'll swim up current looking for that food. And then you can have your rods in there ready to go. Now, that's if the water flow is light enough. If the water flow is too strong, then you may have to push into those eddies or just wait for that tidal flow to go down and wait for the change. Just before those changes can be really good signs for fish to come out feeding. For example, if you've got a strong current here and you've got fish sort of picking up the smells, but they're like, nah, current's a bit too strong, I'm not going to fight that. But then as that current slows down and the tidal flow slows down, they'll find that opportunity to come up for a feed. So it's worth staying there, changes of tide, but ideally, always keep in mind that you got to match your gear, your burley, to how strong the tide is to bring the fish to you. You don't want to have the burley go away, takes the fish away, you want to bring them to you. So trickle of burley trails is ideal for this kind of fishing. From the shore it's a little bit different because you can be a little bit mobile, but the one thing that you really need to consider, now this is great for if you're in the estuaries, rivers, shore bank, or even like off a little beach or something like that. So let's assume you have water flow going left to right. Now the fish are going to sit in the current like so. Now if I cast my rod from here into there with a really heavy sinker, it's going to stay in the one spot. Now you may get one of these fish to sort of scent it out and go, I'm going to go up here and have a feed. Maybe. You could throw some burley, but if I threw burley, I don't really have a cage, because if I have a cage, it's going to be around the shore. I could throw a handful of pellets here, but that current's going to take it to where these fish are here. So ideally, you want to fish finesse in terms of you don't want a sinker that's too big, that says stationary. You actually want a sinker that's going to move. And the more you move with it, the better it's going to be for these fish because it provides a natural approach to the bait. These fish are going to think it's a bit of food coming to them and they're going to eat it up. But also, you're going to cover a lot of ground. So by using it to your advantage, you cast up here and just walk with the line. And by walking with the line, if you've got a paternoster rig or something like that, the sinker is going to bounce on the bottom. And bouncing on the bottom is great because fish like flathead and whiting as well, they can sense vibrations through their belly. And by sensing the vibrations of the sinker hitting the bottom, it's like a fish. It's like a little, it tantalizes their senses. They'll pick that up and they'll eat it. So by using the current to your advantage, using as light as possible sinker to get it out there and just to give you a bit of flow, you don't want your bait to go straight out. You want it to just walk with it and you want it to stay out there just as well, just to move lightly, and that's going to tempt a bite. Then that's what using current is to your advantage. Now with that, if the current's really strong, obviously bulk up your sinkers and things like that. If it's really light, downgrade your sinkers. So it's always vital to have a rig where you can interchange your sinkers. So, a snap swivel or something like that's ideal. If you were to cast here and not move, the water flow will push your bait and it will just do this belly and come here. Not ideal. So with this kind of approach, cast, walk with it. And that's going to hopefully help you find more fish. You're covering a lot more ground, and being a natural approach, you should be able to hook a few more and catch a few more fish. So water flow and reef fishing. So this is an important one because being near the Hawkesbury and a few other places, when you have that tidal flow, if we went back to that slide and you got that kind of boat stationary in the position in the middle of wherever, a lot of the times if you're fishing a flat bottom, it's probably not going to be as productive as if you're fishing a bottom that's contoured or there's reef or something like that. So this can be applied offshore as well. Again, if we stick to the principle that fish are lazy, they're going to use boulders and reefs like this as mini eddies to come out of the current. So if you've got current running that way and you've got these larger boulders on the seafloor, they're stopping that water flow and they're creating a bit of change. So the fish will actually sit behind these boulders, especially both predatory fish and prey. So the predatory fish will sit behind the boulders, out of the current so much, and they'll be chilling, waiting for a bit of fish to come by, and they can snaffle it up. Smaller fish will use these boulders to hide in, again, out of the current, and that's where they'll be hiding. Now, that's why a place like Flint and Steel does so well, because you have a reefy bottom like this. Jewies can come up the river, and they will literally use these as almost stepping stones. They could just go into the rock, and they can have breaks out of the current. When you're fishing sort of shallow reefs and stuff offshore, you can sort of tell there's a bit of current when if you throw a bit of bait in or something like that, you might be able to see a little bit of current, or depending on where your boat is, the anchor flow. So if you're fishing a shallow reef or something like that, it's always good to sort of, if you're anchored, just fish upwards of it, bring your boat over the reef, and then just drop down where the fish could be. You want your bait to come down, but with the current as well, to make it look a lot more natural. So if you're fishing in water flow and there's a contoured bottom, just remember the boulders and reefs underneath will create small eddies. The same principles apply to the as the slide earlier, in that the fish will use those as rest points and also points of ambush. So that's always good to consider when you are fishing a place with a bit of a rocky bottom. Okay, so now from the land-based fishing, so we've gone from that side, let's look at water flow when you're rock fishing. Now this is super important because when you're rock fishing or land-based fishing, you've got to put almost all your eggs in one basket, in that you're gonna go, okay, there's a rock shelf that's a few hundred meters long, I'm gonna go one spot because of this reason and because of this, and that's where I'm gonna catch the fish. And you can't have the ability like a boat where you can just bounce around everywhere. Yes, you can move around a bit, but it's always good to do a little bit of homework, do a bit of observation to find the right spot to fish. So when you're rock fishing, the water flow or from the wave action as the wave crashes onto the rock shelf, it'll generally empty out somewhere. And when it empties out somewhere, that's where the fish know this. So if you've got a reef that sticks out here, waves crash onto here. Now this is a northeast, like if it's a northeast swell, they'll crash this way. If it's a southeast swell, they'll crash this way. Water will come off the shelf and empty here in the south or empty here in the northeast. So if I'm fishing there, I'll be standing here, I'll watch the waves crash, I'll watch the water flow come off the rock shelf and empty into this patch here. Now what that happens then is that as the wave crashes onto the reef here, the power of that wave breaks off bits of seaweed, dislodges little crabs and shellfish and things like that. And these lazy fish here know this, so they're gonna chill there. And they're gonna wait for the waves to, or that water flow to empty in. They can notice this by the change of temperature and the change of current, and also all the wash that comes in as well. Then they can see all the bits of seaweed and they'll be feeding there nice and hungry. So if I'm rock fishing, if I cast here, with the waves going that direction, my line's just gonna sort of hang around here. And the fish aren't really hanging there because they know that the wash is emptying here and that's where the food source is. It's like a natural burley trail. So for me, I'm gonna move down here, I'm gonna throw a little bit of burley to add to that bit of, inlet there. The current flow usually goes out because the wash comes in, energy goes out. That flow will take my burley out, attract the fish to me, because if I throw my burley and it's, like if I throw my burley here, it's gonna be pushed over here where the fish aren't. But if I throw it here, I'm gonna be pushing it to where the fish will be. And with that current going straight out rather than going left and right, it's gonna bring the fish to me from out there rather than to the left and right. Because you wanna be attracting fish that are a little bit further out as well. Rock fishing is, if I'm fishing from the shore, in front of me, there'll be a range of fish, but a little bit out further, you'll be reaching trevally, salmon, tailor, kingfish, even bigger reef species, or randomer reef species like, mowong and things like that. If your burley trail is good enough and it's coming out here, all the fish in this area here will come and have a sniff, and that's where you'll be fishing and that's where you'll be catching fish. So it's super important to watch the water flow and fishing the rocks, watch where it covers and where it goes. So just follow a wave. As the wave crashes, just follow that wave on the rock shelf, see where it empties, and that's where you want to be fishing, where that wave empties. Natural burley trail, that current going out to sea tells the fish through that lateral line, okay, this current I know brings food, I'm going to start feeding in that area, and then hopefully you'll catch more fish doing that. So for example, and this is a sort of Ludovic kind of a approach, you can do this for different types of rock fishing too. So when you've got that water flow going, you don't want to cast your line all the time, especially if you're float fishing, straight out into where the fish might be feeding. Especially timid fish like Ludovic, rock blackfish, sometimes even trevally at times. You want to actually have your bait go out with the flow. So if the fish is sitting in the current and you cast and it plonks right here, they might think it's a bit sus, trigger their sort of flight or flight response, and they'll generally sort of shy away from it. But if you cast in front of them and let that go with the current, looks a little bit more natural, and there's a better chance that you'll get a hook up, especially if the water's a little bit calm or if you're fishing for more timid type fish. So when you're rock fishing, let it go with the flow a bit more, and that's where understanding the water flow is really important, because you can let that bait look as natural as possible, find where the fish are feeding, and those two recipes there, or those two ingredients there, will hopefully help you catch a bit more fish off the rocks. Okay, so now from the rocks, we're just going to jump with surf fishing. Surf fishing is a little bit different because you have a little less kind of wash over of rocks and things like that, and you have a large beach, and you're going to have to contend with waves and also wind. So with this sort of layout here, it's very similar to when you're fishing in the estuary system, in the rivers, river system, sorry, where you're dealing with eddies when there's a lot of current. Now, current is generated generally by the waves, and as I've mentioned before, with those strong northeast swells, it can create a lot of left to right, if you're on the East Coast, left to right current. And it's a real jerk when you're fishing, because if I'm fishing here and I cast my line there, wind and waves will push my bait all the way here. I can walk with it. I can walk with it and then hopefully find some fish doing that. But the difference between that on a beach compared to an estuary, estuaries will generally have the same contour or depth for a fair long period and the fish will sit there. Whereas a beach, the fish will generally hug around a gutter. And if the gutter's only 50 meters wide here, and I'm casting there, and it's ending up over here, it's really quick, you're not going to find those fish in that gutter there. And if you're finding fish, or if you're looking for fish like brim and whiting, they don't really like the current too much. So they'll generally be hiding in places like this, which is the eddy from a headland. So if you've got, generally most of the East Coast beaches, except for the really long ones, will generally have north and south headlands. If you've got water flow coming from the northeast direction coming across, you want to hug a north headland. A north headland will keep it out of the wind and out of, if it's windy, will keep it out of the current and water flow. You have, again, that back eddy. So sometimes you'll have all this wave action coming here, crashing, all this energy, but then that back eddy might push water back out that way. And fish like that because it's a little bit different to what they're dealing with here, and that might bring a bit more food, and it's a good area for ambush. So with these strong currents, you want to fish, hug the headlands. If it's a south wind or south swell, water flow's going that way, hug the south headland. So use those headlands or landmarks to your advantage to find those eddies and differences in water flow to help you find a little bit more fish. So that's when there's strong current. Now, this is just going to break down how a gutter actually works. So if you're a fish, right, and you're out to sea, they're not like us. They're not standing on top of a car park or a headland looking down on the beach with polarized sunnies to work out where the gutters are. They're in the water. They can't see an aerial view of the beach. However, through that lateral line, through detecting those changes in water temp and current, etc., that's how they tell when there's a good gutter. It's that backflow of water. So as a wave crashes in the shore, that energy just doesn't disappear. It goes back into the water. And as that energy goes back in, it'll generally congregate and find an outlet to go out, and that's called a gutter or a rip. If you've seen Bondi Rescue, I'm sure you've seen a few of them. That rip is essentially all that wave energy coming in, going back out. And as the waves are bigger, those rips will generally be a lot stronger with that water flow going out. So with your predatory fish, like brim, like salmon, tailor, jewfish, and sharks, they will hang out the back here. And as they swim past, they will feel that bit of water flow come out from the gutter. So picture it like if you're walking in the city and there's big buildings, there's a lot of wind. When you hit the building, there's not much wind. And then when you go through a bit of a gap in those buildings and that wind funnels through and you sort of hits you on the side and you sort of look down and go, whoa, what was that? Similar to this kind of effect. But instead of buildings, you've got beach structure, water flow going out in one area. So these fish will go along here, feel that current going that way, like that wind hitting you, and they're going to look up that way and go swim up current because they know that that current that they've hit might have a bit of smell to it if you've got a bait there, or if there's dead fish or something on the beach here, that current's pushing it out, they'll smell that and they're going to go and have a look because they know that that current is bringing some deeper water and it's an opportunity to feed in the shallows. So your predatory fish, because of that outgoing water, will come up here to have a sniff, and that's where you'll be fishing. You're in the middle of that gutter, you got a bait out there, that's the perfect opportunity. Your smaller fish, like brim and whiting, they will hug the sides. They're generally living on the beach, so they're happy to go up into the shallows and stuff here, but with the gutter, it condenses them to an area to help you find them. So they use that current and they'll hug the edge of the gutter. And the reason they hug the edge of the gutter is because two things: it's going to keep them away from predators from above, like birds, and also from the middle, like sharks, jewfish, etc. But that's where the fish is going to be. That's where the food's going to be, sorry. As the waves crash on the shallow here, sand gets broken up and emptied into that gutter. And as layers of sand come off the trenches into the hole, it exposes pippies, little crabs and things like that. So the brim or whiting will sit on the edges of those gutter, just waiting, and they'll come up onto the shallow too to have a look and have a feed and then go back into the gutter. So it's basically a little highway for them to access shallow water and also find food. So that's why it's super important when you're beach fishing to find a gutter that's going back out to sea. Yes, you can fish gutters that may be holes or something like that, but ideally, if you're really getting into beach fishing or you want to start getting into it, always look for a gutter that has going back out to sea. And you can see that because If you're watching the gutter, watching the waves crash, you'll generally see current flow coming in, and you might just see a bit of change as the water goes back out, and it creates sometimes a little U of water because you'll have energy coming in from the surface, right? So the surface energy from the waves is coming towards the beach, but the undertow, which is the subsurface energy from the waves going underneath, that's why rips are so dangerous, because if I'm standing still, that water at the top might be going this way, the water down below is going that way. So the water below could be quite strong, and it's pulling my legs under as my body is trying to swim up the top. So not only are you fighting the waves at the top, but you're fighting the undertow that's pulling you under. And that undertow is that current going back out, which the fish love, but the top is the waves coming in. So you can sometimes see a U and a change of direction in the waves because they're battling the undertow. And that is a good telltale sign to go, sweet, that gutter's current is leading back out to sea. That's where I'm going to start fishing. And that's it. So that kind of covers the importance of water flow when you're in the estuary, in the rivers, a little bit offshore, beach and rock. It's super important to know that the water flow always makes a change in fish feeding behavior, and you just need to be able to adapt depending on how you're fishing. So by being mobile, or by being, having rigs where you can change sinkers, etc., and then finding areas where the fish might be feeding through eddies or through actual gutters or currents bringing food in. It's a general rule of thumb is that it's bringing food. So if you can find areas where that current will help fish feed with less effort, then that will hopefully help you find more fish. So it is a bit it's kind of hard to explain obviously on a screen, but it just gives you kind of the principles, or when you start fishing, to just consider that factor. You're going to consider the weather, you're going to consider the wind, you're going to consider the sun, the cloud, etc., to whether your lure choice or whether your bait choice or your location, but also very important to understand current and water flow. And that will hopefully help you catch a lot more fish. So yeah, thanks for joining us for this one. We will be doing more, so don't be shy to drop a few comments in what you want to know about fishing. We're always happy to take direction and advice to what you guys want to know. And yeah, again, like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell because that's going to alert you every time we go live, every new video. We're trying to increase our videos to really increase the education piece of fishing, because we always want you guys out there catching more fish, and without all the trying to cut through all the jargon and things like that. And again, send us an email if you have any questions, etc. So yeah.